Hello, and welcome to your Sister in Elections, where today I'm going to be looking at polling data. And as you might know if you've watched any of my videos beforehand, I like to use this website quite a lot, 538, and this is their national overview for the presidential election, and they currently have it that Biden is favoured to win the election coming up in November. Now, at the moment, they currently have it at a 83 to 17 chance of the former vice president to win the race. And this is, if we go down to the rolling average, and this is starting from the start of June, the lowest it has gone is, about a 3 in 10 chance for Donald Trump winning. Yeah, about 3 in 10 at this point. The lowest point Joe Biden had was a 2/3 chance of winning, and it's only expanded ever since then, and is currently at the highest it has been since, and that is 83% chance for a Joe Biden victory. Now, the problem with polling data is, especially back in 2016, it was, for the most part, very incorrect in predicting the winners in some very key battleground states. These key battleground states being Michigan, Wisconsin, especially, and Pennsylvania. Now, the polls got a lot of stick back in 2016, and rightly so, especially in Wisconsin, which was the worst affected, I believe. On election day, Clinton was up 6 points, 6 or 5 points in Wisconsin on election day. Now, of course, the polls had, tightened following the last presidential debate, but Clinton was still up into a likely lead. You know, anything above 5 point lead over your opposition is considered likely. And Clinton was up 5 or 6 points, so meeting that criteria in Wisconsin. Wisconsin ended up going for Trump by just under 1%, about 0.7 points, a point difference for Trump. It was tighter in Michigan and Pennsylvania. I believe it was about 0.5 in Pennsylvania and about 0.3 in Michigan. So not huge leads for Donald Trump, but enough to win him the uh, electors in each of those states, and they all voted for him in the Electoral College, handing him the presidency. Now, the problem with polling data back in 2016 is, fair enough, there was a lot of consensus. Many pollsters, gave. I'm just looking at a few of the articles. This one was released back in February this year. There were people giving it 98% chance for Clinton victory. I believe some of them were even giving a 99% chance. Of course, 538, the website I used, had the most conservative chance, which was roughly a 71.4 chance to win on election day, which, still isn't, correct. But it was basically saying that Donald Trump victory is likely. A Donald Trump victory is unlikely, but not impossible. So as much as, and I think that was, widely held between the mainstream media. The mainstream media were largely shocked. Even Fox News was not in the driving seat when it said Trump was going to win, but he ended up coming out on top fair and square in 2016, and the polls definitely affected that. And why is that? Why is that? There was definitely some incorrect polling data. Like I said, the worst being in Wisconsin. Nationwide, it was actually okay. Clinton held a 4 point lead on election day, and in the end, she did win by 2 points nationwide, which falls within the margin of error. But like I said, in these Rust Belt states that handed on Trump the election, the polls were inaccurate for a very large portion. Just being outside the margin of error on election day. And the main reason for this is that the polling samples that they did were, from registered voters instead of likely voters. I prefer to look at polls that look at likely voters because there's quite a few people who are registered to vote, but have no intention of voting. And whereas if you take likely voters, for example, you can get a much better grasp at the actual people that will end up going to the polls in the day or in the weeks up to the election and on election day itself. And especially because you take a sample, you don't look at 330 million people who live in the country. You look at a sample, roughly from about 500 to 3,000 is the usual sample size. And many of these, as you can see listed in this article, there was way too many college graduates in the polls. And of course, Donald Trump did not do too well on college graduates, but if there was a lopsided amount of college graduates that did not reflect the actual population of the state, then you'd have the feelings and sentiments of the college graduates, which by and large favored Clinton by about a 20 or 10-point lead, altering the polls results. Whereas the white working class, which was underrepresented in many of these polls, came out in droves for Donald Trump. Many who would never vote or traditionally voted for the Democrats, the white working class switched parties in a large enough number, not much so in mass, but a considerable number switched parties and voted for Donald Trump, which handed him the manufacturing states such as Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And this was the main problem in 2016. Pollsters do not want to get it wrong again. And you could argue that there's many arguments going out there that the pollsters want and will, arguably actively favor Joe Biden because the mainstream media, such as CNN, which is definitely biased towards the Democrats, and arguably you could say MSNBC and ABC News are also somewhat biased to the Democrats, but um, quite a lot of the polling firms are independent. They want, as good as polls as possible. They don't want to be biased to one side. They're independent companies. They will only suffer as much as the polling industry, got a lot of stick. That is bad for their industry. They want to produce as many possible, most accurate polls that they can in helping, reaffirm the confidence and, validity of the polls that they produce. So the argument that all polls are going to be biased towards Joe Biden, other than internal Republican polls, is quite a stupid argument when you think about it, because the only people who are going to lose out in that situation are the pollsters. Pollsters will lose out in a situation where they bias or have a favourable candidate, which would then make them, which then would make their polls inaccurate. And even if you do take that, quite a lot of pollsters, found out the issues that they had in 2016 and have readjusted their polls, readjusted the samples that they take, readjusted the voters or the people that they actually select, whether they be registered voters, or likely voters instead of registered voters, to try and get a better grasp of the actual people who will be coming out to vote. And, of course, this 538 forecast is not going to be 100% correct, but it still gave, back in 2016, it gave a very fair chance that Donald Trump was not dead in the swamp, but he had, a fighting chance. I'd say 30% chance of winning is, a decent chance. I wouldn't like those odds, but I wouldn't say it's over. And in the end, he did win, somewhat considerably in the Electoral College. So I think to say that the polls are inaccurate this year is not 100%. Of course, you can't take the polls for granted. You can't just say, oh, Joe Biden's up 9% nationally, which he is at the moment. You can't just say, oh, that's going to happen. Because, first of all, we're 4 weeks almost, 3.5 weeks at this point out from the election. Anything could happen. Of course, Hillary Clinton lost most of her polling lead in that space between the last presidential debate and election day. Of course, election day was held about a week later than it is this year, but there's still enough time for significant polling data to change. And as we can see, that Donald Trump is trying to present himself as, almost recovered entirely from his COVID diagnosis. Of course, he can't go out yet because he is still contagious of it. But as soon as he can, he will be going out trying to campaign and trying to push the fact that COVID is not as dangerous as it is portrayed to be. And whether that can help get, whether the president himself, recovering from it, with, not being sat in a hospital bed, and unable to move, that could definitely be a very positive thing for him in the final few weeks of the election. So overall, as I was saying, the polling data and polling methods have most certainly improved this year. The polling firms do not want to get it wrong. The independent polling firms, where their main job, not news organizations, but the independent polling firms, that their job is to provide an accurate and well-rounded analysis of the voter and voter intentions, will want to get the most accurate polling data that they can find. And being biased to one candidate is not going to help them in the long run whatsoever. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all again soon.